New York has to be one of the best cities to use as a setting for a video game. The grid layout of its streets and blocky buildings should make it easy to build. The place is full of famous and instantly recognizable landmarks, and it's also surrounded by water on 3 sides, giving you the perfect boundary for your game. And if you're feeling a little bit ambitious, you could always spread out your map to include some of the other boroughs. That's why so many developers keep coming back to New York City again and again as the perfect backdrop for their games. But out of all these New Yorks, which video game New York is the most New York? This isn't going to be one of those videos where I generally crossfade in between different games, showing the same landmark, measuring pixels, deeply analysing every detail. Those videos already exist. Instead, I created a list of 15 New York things to do in video games, often combining landmarks and in-game mechanics. The rules are very straightforward. If I can do the thing in the game will win a point. If I can't, the game won't win a point. Whoever gets the most points wins. I'll also be awarding gold stars for whichever game I decide does that thing the best. These won't be worth any additional points, but will help resolve any tiebreakers. Right, let's meet the 10 contestants for this challenge. Driver. Driver, Parallel Lines. The Crew 2. Midnight Club, Street Racing. Grand Theft Auto 4. The Godfather. Spider-Man 2. The Division. Prototype. And True Crime, New York City. You may be wondering where games such as Mafia 2 and GTA 3 are. Well, these games are silly New York flavoured. They weren't quite New Yorky enough, if that makes sense. Also, games like Crysis 2 and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 were a bit too linear. But there are so many games set in New York. Many of the ones on this list have sequels and prequels, so we're bound to come to New York City again at some point in the future. Leave a comment below if I've missed out your favourite game set in New York. Unlike my previous video set in LA, which you should definitely watch after this one, if you haven't already, I haven't had the privilege of visiting New York, so I can't really give you a first-hand opinion on how realistic the landmarks look, but I have done a ton of research. This also means I can't show off my holiday photos. I know, I'm sure you're all very upset about that. Anyway, let's jump into this challenge. Challenge 1 is to reach the top of the Empire State Building. This 102-story Art Deco behemoth has been part of the Manhattan skyline for almost 100 years. All of these games will almost certainly include it. But how many of them will let you reach the top? We can find the Empire State Building in Driver. At least that's what the internet says this building is here. Obviously with a game this old, it's going to be very under-detailed. And with the graphics only being able to load a short distance, we can only see the base of it. And obviously, as we're stuck in a car, we have no way to reach the non-existent top of this building. We can see the tower in all its glory at Midnight Club. The detail is a little basic. Again, no way to get to the top. We can drive through the lobby, so we're making progress. There's a weird glitch in True Crime where it disappears if you get too far away, but it's still there. We get an excellent view of it in The Godfather. As this game is set in the 1940s and 50s, it's the tallest building on the map. It also looks pretty good in Driver Parallel Lines, but unfortunately we can't reach the top of it in any of these 3 games. In The Division, the Empire State Building sits inside the player versus player zone, and my low-level ass isn't going in there to get murdered over and over and over again to try and capture some footage of the thing. And even if I did go in there, we still can't go all the way to the top. We can get a nice view of it from the side though, if I just go around here and oh my god, what the hell have they done to you? Seriously, that's one janky looking Empire State Building. It's also the same story in The Crew 2, another game developed by Ubisoft. So what is going on here? I'm not going to go into too much detail here, mainly because that's not what this video is about, and also the 2 articles I read about the subject really don't make me qualified enough to talk about it. In theory, as the games are set in a public space, it should be perfectly legal to show off a famous landmark. But trademark law and independent property, it's all very muddy. Earlier games and independent studios can kind of slip under the radar, but if you're a AAA developer building the next big game, you kind of need to cover your ass a bit to avoid any potential lawsuits. The building's owners have every right to sue you if they don't like how their building is portrayed in your game. So this leaves you with 3 options. Contact the building's owners and come up with some kind of agreement, normally financial, just don't put the building in your game at all, or change it just enough so you can stand up in a court of law and say, hey, that's not the Empire State Building, I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, where were we? Ah yes, The Crew 2 and its trademark safe Empire State Building. Seeing how this game lets you swap between vehicles on the fly, it's very easy to turn into a helicopter and fly up to the top of the building. Now there isn't a lot of space up here, but if I get nice and close and turn into a dirt bike, there we go. Finally, a game where we can reach the top of the Empire State Building. Sorry, the whatever building this is, that's clearly the Empire State Building for legal reasons. But that's still good enough for a pass. In the game Prototype, we play as Alex Mercer, who has a bad case of the emos. He's also been infected with a virus, the kind of virus that turns you into a video game anti-hero, with a bunch of random superpowers, one of which includes running up buildings. So after a swift jog, Alex easily makes it to the top of the Empire State Building. From a distance, the shape of it looks perfect, but up close it's lacking detail. There's no handrails or telescopes. And the view is a bit dark and foreboding, just like Alex. In GTA 4, good old Nico Bellic doesn't need superpowers to reach the top, he just uses the elevator like a normal person. We just go to the blue chevron, and here we are, magically teleported to the top of the building. We get a lovely view of Liberty City up here, although it has to be said, compared to other games on this list, it does look a little small, but there's some nice detailing up here, including these binoculars you can look through, although the guardrails do look a little low. It'd be very easy for someone to just climb over this, and oh my god Nico, no! We can find a highly detailed version of the Empire State Building in Spider-Man 2, but how on earth are we going to get up to the top? Oh right, Spider-Man, obviously. We can climb straight to the top, and this is definitely the best version of the Empire State Building's viewing platform. It's full of tourists scrambling for the best view, just like the real thing. We can also see the binoculars, and the guardrails are a realistic size. And the view is simply gorgeous, and goes on for miles, truly showing off the power of the PlayStation 5. It's a worthy winner of the Gold Star. Complete a circuit of the Brooklyn Bridge and Hugh Carey Tunnel. Being almost completely surrounded by water, Manhattan is famous for its bridges and tunnels, the most famous of which has to be the Brooklyn Bridge. For this challenge I wanted to combine a bridge and a tunnel, and seeing how the Hugh Carey Tunnel sits just south of the Brooklyn Bridge, this pair made the most sense. We need to walk, or drive, across the bridge into Brooklyn, then loop back through the tunnel, into Manhattan, and arrive back where we started. The Brooklyn Bridge and Midnight Club is there purely for decoration. You can drive under it, but not over it. For some strange reason, they've given the bridge 3 towers. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe the printer jammed on the reference photo. We can attempt a brisk jog over the bridge in Prototype. But eventually we reach an invisible wall, and Alex starts running on the spot, as if he's found a particularly slippery patch of grease. We get a gorgeous view of the Brooklyn Bridge in the prologue of The Division. It's so detailed, but unfortunately when it's time to reach Manhattan for the main game, we take a helicopter rather than crossing this beautiful bridge. The bridge is also there purely for decoration in True Crime, but they've got the details for this spot on. Even the on and off ramps to get onto the bridge are exactly the same as what you'd see in real life. Unlike the previous games I've already gone through, we can actually find the entrance to the Hugh Carey Tunnel, but unfortunately we can't drive over the bridge or through the tunnel. They're both closed. The Broker Bridge in GTA 4 is a lovely representation of the Brooklyn Bridge. We can drive all the way across into Broker, the GTA 4 version of Brooklyn. But unfortunately we can't complete the circuit, as there are no tunnels south of this bridge. It's a similar story in The Crew 2. The bridge may lack some of the detail, but it's still clearly the Brooklyn Bridge. And again, when we start heading south, there's no tunnel to take us back into Manhattan. And it's not like this is a technical issue, as the Hudson Tunnel exists in this game. The Godfather also lets us pass over the bridge into their tiny version of Brooklyn, but again, no tunnel to take us back. In Spider-Man 2, you can swing or parkour your way across the Brooklyn Bridge, and it looks absolutely amazing in this game. We can also find the entrance to the Hugh Carey Tunnel, so let's go in! No. Oh, okay. The game won't actually let you do that. I guess in this universe, whichever spider bit Peter wasn't of the underground or tunneling variety. So that's a fail. What about Driver? Well, in Driver we found a very basic, slightly janky version of the Brooklyn Bridge. But we can also find the Hugh Carey Tunnel as well. So this game gives us our first pass for this challenge. I think the game designers just really wanted you to be able to drive over the Brooklyn Bridge. And it was easier just to slap a tunnel in there, rather than build a model of the Manhattan Bridge. Still, it counts. And that leaves us with Driver Parallel Lines, the only other game you can complete this circuit. The models in this game aren't perfect, but they're still better than the original Driver. So Parallel Lines gets the gold star for this one. Ride the subway. This is definitely the easiest way to get around New York, to avoid all the famous gridlock traffic. For this challenge you have to be on a moving train, inside, or surfing on the roof like an absolute badass. Don't try this at home, kids. It can be underground or elevated. There are no subway stations or elevated tracks in Driver. In Midnight Club 2, we can find a few entrances to subway stations, but they're sealed behind indestructible gates. Things get very spooky in The Godfather. There are sections of elevated tracks, and if you walk underneath them you can hear trains passing over. But there's nothing there. It must be a ghost train, ooh! We can find subway entrances in The Crew 2, but if you try driving down there you're stopped by an invisible wall. This game also includes elevated sections of railway, which you can drive across, but there aren't any trains, which is a bit odd, seeing as other parts of the map do include trains. And also if you cross the bridge and try to drive into the subway system, the tunnel's all blocked off. There's a similar problem in Prototype. You can find open sections of rail track. I don't know what happened here, they're blocked off even before the zombie outbreak. In The Division, you can find many beautifully detailed underground subway stations. But according to the sign, the trains are cancelled. Ah, there's your problem. Yeah, that'll do it. There aren't any underground stations in Driver Parallel Lines. but there are elevated sections of track, with rather under-detailed stations. This is the first game on the list to actually include animated trains. But look, here's one now. Let's try and board it. Okay, the doors haven't opened. That's a bit rude. Well, I'm on, kind of. Here we go, and oh, I've died. Just touching a moving train in this game is an instant death. For no train rides for Tanner. Wait, what's this dude called again? Oh well, doesn't matter. In the first Marvel Spider-Man game, you could use subway stations as a form of fast travel, but that's no longer the case in Spider-Man 2. You can just click anywhere in the map and you're instantly teleported. So this means we can no longer walk into the underground stations. He just awkwardly turns around and heads back up again. But the trains are still clearly operating when we head over to Brooklyn and see the overground network of trains. We can't go inside, but we can web ourselves up onto the roof and cling on with our sticky feet and enjoy a lovely train ride through Brooklyn. But we tried to ride the train into the underground tunnels. It doesn't work. Still, that's a pass. True Crime does have functioning stations, as they're used as a form of fast travel to get around this game's version of Manhattan. And they're all in the real life locations of when this game came out, which is a cool detail, but all the stations look the same. You just simply wait for a train to turn up, go inside, and then pick where you want to go. It's a nice detail, and that's a nice pass right there. But by far the best subway system has to go to Grand Theft Auto 4. The subway is fully functional. You can head into any station, board a train, and ride around until you want to get off. The stations are also incredibly detailed and unique, both the underground and the above ground. It's not something I've had a proper look at until making this video. Not only that, but also the subway tunnels are highly detailed, with maintenance areas and even hobos living down there, so GTA 4 picks up its first gold star. Take a bike ride through Central Park. What I really wanted to do was ride on the famous horse and carriages they have here, but seeing how none of the games include those, we're going to have to take a bike ride instead. Unfortunately for The Division, Driver, and Godfather, the maps don't stretch far enough north to reach Central Park, so no romantic strolls with your gangster buddies. We can enter the park at Midnight Club, but unlike the other games in this franchise, we can't ride motorcycles yet. The park itself feels a little empty. There isn't nearly enough trees, but there are plenty of bridges and even lakes you can drive through. There are a few nice little details like the boats on the lake, but other places like the famous Bethesda terrace and fountain are very under-detailed. Alex, that's a tank. Definitely what I had in mind for a relaxing bike ride. The park here is full of trees, and lots of NPCs enjoying a lovely late-night stroll. We can also find the Belvedere Castle, but still, no bikes, no pass. Sorry. Right, finally a bike. There's a small number of bikes we can choose from in driver parallel lines, and then race through the park, annoying everyone out here trying to get their steps in for the day. The park itself is a bit sparse, not nearly enough trees. They've done a decent job on this massive reservoir in the centre, but the Bethesda terrace is a bit under-detailed, and lacking its famous fountain. But it still gets our first pass. We can also ride bikes in the crew too. There are plenty of trees in this version of Central Park, but overall the scale feels a little bit small. The castle, the terrace, the reservoir, the fountain, they're all here. This is also the only game on our list that has a jet boat racing course, so that's something. Of course there are also bikes in GTA 4, an absolutely gorgeous version of Central Park, called Middle Park in this game. I particularly like the detail of all the NPCs who are out enjoying the park. Some of them are out jogging, some of them are walking around with coffee, and there are even park workers out here raking leaves. Of course, I'm ruining all their days by smashing into them with this bike, but with this game's hilarious ragdoll physics, it'd be rude not to. Some parts of the park are beautifully detailed, like this especially disgusting public restroom, but other details of the real-life park are missing, like the Belvedere Castle. And also it has to be said this park feels a little bit smaller compared to other ones on this list. True Crime NYC definitely doesn't have that problem. I enjoyed a very fast-paced bike ride through this game's version of Central Park, until my bike blew up. This game's version of the park is absolutely massive. There's no way I had time to walk around the park, so I had to grab a taxi to continue my exploration. It's full of details you'll see in the real park. The terraces here, the castle, even other details we've not seen before, such as the baseball fields you can see on the Great Lawn. And the reservoir is absolutely massive, maybe too big. This thing looks as big as Lake Michigan. Still, this is an excellent Central Park. Not as good as the one in Spider-Man 2. But wait, Spider-Man doesn't ride bikes, but Peter Parker does. In the side mission, you can test out an e-bike and go for a lovely cycle ride around the park. The detail in this park is amazing. It's absolutely full of gorgeous green trees. The Bethesda Terrace and Fountain, Belvedere Castle, the reservoir, the baseball fields, they're all here. But what makes this park feel so alive is the NPCs. There's loads of them all just going about their day. Some are doing yoga, some are playing frisbee. There's even people in boats, chilling out in some of the lakes. Definitely a worthy winner of the gold star. Right, 4 challenges down. Let's quickly look at the scoreboard. Spider-Man 2 and Grand Theft Auto 4 both currently have 3 points. But with 2 gold stars, that puts Spider-Man 2 in the lead. Driver Parallel Lines is third, with The Division, Midnight Club, and The Godfather yet to score a single point. But there's still a long way to go. Smash a hot dog stand. The humble hot dog stand has been a common sight on New York streets since the late 1800s. So let's celebrate this New York icon by smashing them to bits. There's plenty of street furniture you can pick up and throw at pedestrians in Prototype, but unfortunately, there are no hot dog stands to be found anywhere. We can, however, find plenty of these in The Division, but unfortunately the hot dog stands are completely bulletproof. Not even a frag grenade can destroy these mighty fast food carts. Well, this is a cover shooter. If you're hiding behind this and a big dude with a machine gun starts running towards you, the last thing you want is for this thing to blow up in your face. You can find hot dog stands in Driver, and they're fully destructible. Well, for 1999 standards anyway. Trust me, this blew our little minds back in the day. We were easily pleased back then. Driver upped its game in parallel lines, as the hot dog stands rather satisfyingly smashed into bits, and there are even vendors stood behind them. I have to give a special shout out for this game, and its donut stands. If you smash some of these, all the cops in the city come after you. That is pretty hilarious. They're not very common. We can find a few hot dog stands in Midnight Club. You can smash into them, but they remain as one solid object. They're still good enough for a pass. Hot dog stands are even harder to find in Spider-Man 2. I couldn't find any thwipping my way through the streets, but in one of the story missions, where you go to Coney Island, they're all over the place. They're fully destructible. You just need to give them a good old punch. The Crew 2's version of New York also has hot dog stands. They also have vendors who run away in terror as you destroy their livelihoods. The hot dog stands in The Godfather look a little off. You may think they're historically accurate, but the hot dog stands in the 1940s and 50s look nothing like this. They've pretty much remained unchanged since the start of the 20th century. This design appears to be more based on a Victorian peanut roasting cart, for some reason. Wherever this design originated from, smashing into them opens up a tear in reality, and they instantly teleport back to wherever they came from. In True Crime, the hot dog stands spontaneously combust if you smash into them, which is pretty cool. You can also order yourself a ghost hot dog from a ghost vendor to regenerate your health. But the king of the hot dog stands has to go to GTA 4. They're highly detailed and fully smashable. Not only that, but you can also buy hot dogs from a friendly vendor, and there's a full animation, so Nico can chow down on as many wieners as he likes. Not only that, we can also throw them at people, and also an honourable mention to the burger stands that explode if you shoot the gas tanks. A worthy gold star winner. Visit a museum. One of the main things you can do in New York is go to a museum. There are loads of famous ones to choose from, including the Guggenheim, Natural History Museum of America, as well as various art galleries. And if you're feeling particularly raunchy, there's even a museum of mathematics. The museums in the game can be real or fictional, but you actually have to be able to enter them and look around an interior. Prototype doesn't really do interiors, unless it's an enemy base, so no museums we can go into here. Same goes for Driver and Driver PL. And in the Crew 2, you can see the art museum. It's also there in The Godfather. But in both these games, we can't go inside. The Division has many detailed interiors, but none of which are museums. I reached out to the Division community to double check this, and the best answer I got was, I don't think so. So please correct me down in the comments if this isn't true. I'd love to give the Division its first point. In Midnight Club, we can't exit the car, so ensuring we can't go into any museums. There are lots of fun shortcuts, heading through building interiors. And there's one in particular. If you head to the waterfront and over this jump, you can land inside the USS Intrepid, an aircraft carrier that's now been turned into a museum. Today we can see such exhibits as Concorde, the SR-71 Blackbird, and even a space shuttle. But back in 2000, it was a lot more basic, like we see here in the game. And also, I know you can kind of enter the Intrepid in the Division, but this is clearly just a military aircraft carrier, and not a museum, so I can't give it a pass for that. But Midnight Club definitely gets a pass. In True Crime New York, we go to the Zuma, which is a fictional museum sitting on the site of the American Natural History Museum. In this mission you do a bit of sneaking around, trying to stealth your way through an exhibit all about the Aztecs. So that's another pass right there. GTA 4 has a similar mission, but it's a bit more shooty than stealthy. Again, it's another version of the Natural History Museum. It's full of fully destructible fossils, including whales and dinosaur bones. Very cool. You may have noticed I'm using gameplay footage from Liberty City Stories for this one, but it is also in the main game of GTA 4. Look, there's Nico right now. This was a worthy contender for the gold star, but I have to give it to Spider-Man 2. The Natural History Museum also appears for a brief second in this cutscene, which is a clear nod to Jurassic Park. You can also walk around an outside exhibition at the Museum of Art, but that's not why I'm giving it the gold star. There's a couple of side missions in Harlem where you're helping out a jazz museum, and once you've completed the 2 side missions, you're free to wander around this virtual museum. It is so incredibly detailed, and is full of a lot of interesting facts about real jazz musicians. I mean, I don't like jazz, I couldn't care less, but it's still very cool. I thought this museum was entirely fictional, but there is actually a jazz museum in Harlem. Sure, it's not quite this fancy, but it's still pretty cool that this place has a real life counterpart. Take a yellow cab from Times Square to the Chrysler Building. Okay, there's a lot to unpack with this one. Obviously we'll be looking at how detailed Times Square and the Chrysler Building are, but how you take an iconic New York taxi is open for interpretation. But to really impress me and earn a gold star in this challenge, you need to get the street layout perfect. It's a simple straight line, heading east from the southernmost tip of Times Square. We then need to drive for 5 blocks, first passing the New York Library on the right, and then Grand Central on the left, passing under a bridge, and then the Chrysler Building should also be there on our left-hand side. Let's start off with the division. Times Square here is super creepy, as New York is in the middle of a pandemic. It's very eerie seeing all those bright neon signs switched off, and the square plunged into total darkness. Abandoned yellow taxis litter the streets, but unfortunately we can't drive them. But we can shut their doors, which is something, I guess. If I start walking towards the Chrysler Building, we pass a very beautifully detailed version of Grand Central. But when we get to the side of the Chrysler Building, it's nowhere to be seen. Okay Crew 2, what on earth are you trying to pull here? I can't allow this yellow taxi. It's clearly just a Lamborghini painted yellow, with the word taxi cruelly stuck all over it. Also, Times Square in this game doesn't quite feel right. It feels a bit too open. I mean, there are animated signs, but there doesn't feel like there's enough of them. The route we take towards the Chrysler Building does take us past the New York Library and Grand Central, but they're kind of in the wrong place. And yet again, the Chrysler Building is absent. Spider-Man 2 has the best version of Times Square out of all the games on our list. You feel like you're being absolutely bombarded with advertising. Everywhere you look, there's a billboard flashing at you, trying to get your attention. Also, this being the newest game on the list, it also includes the brand new pedestrianized area, which is a cool detail. Obviously, Spidey can't drive, but we can car surf. I hop onto a yellow cab, which is heading down the street I need, but there's a problem. We're soon caught up in a traffic jam. This happens a lot in this game. I once tried to car surf my way around the edge of the map, but it was impossible because the traffic is very glitchy. Sometimes the traffic won't move, even if the lights are on green, and it's so easy for everything to become gridlocked. The street layout of the Chrysler Building is wrong, but we do pass a beautiful version of Grand Central. But yet again, there's no Chrysler Building, even though the Chrysler Building was there in the first Spider-Man game. Well, it turns out the Chrysler Building has recently changed owners. The old owners were pretty chill about the building being included in video games, but its new owners, not so much. In Driver's Free Roam, you can't drive around in a yellow taxi, but in one of the story missions you can. So I took that cab to Driver's very basic Times Square. If it wasn't for all the billboards, you wouldn't know this was Times Square. With that said, I can still drive to the base of the Chrysler Building, and Driver picks up the first pass for this challenge. We don't pass Grand Central on the drive here, even though it is on the map. Look, here it is. It's just in the wrong place, too far north. We find a nice retro version of Times Square in Driver parallel lines, complete with animated flashing billboards. And there are plenty of old style cabs for us to steal. But there's no library or Grand Central. We get our first decent looking Chrysler Building. Our starting car in Midnight Club is a yellow taxi, as at the beginning of the game, you start off as a hard-working taxi driver, who then goes on to become street race champion, a tale as old as time. I really like this game's version of Times Square. There's plenty of giant billboards that blind you in the late night setting of this game. We don't pass the library, but Grand Central's there, but no bridge. And yes, there's the Chrysler Building. GTA 4 has a highly detailed version of Times Square. Again, there are so many billboards to look at, some with funny and very inappropriate advertisements. It's the only game on our list for fully functioning taxis. You can hail them from the sidewalk and get in the back, and they'll take you to wherever you want to go. Sure, their driving's not the best, but we're here in one piece. The drive from Times Square to the Chrysler Building is very short in this game, and we don't pass the game's version of Grand Central Station. But the Chrysler Building looks pretty good. Before the map is completely overrun and destroyed by zombies, we can find a decent version of Times Square in prototype. It may not be as detailed as some of the others, but it's still a decent version of this popular tourist attraction. I had to go at car surfing, but this didn't work, so plan B. Well, I am technically taking a cab. You can't argue with that. It's pure chaos as I start sprinting towards the Chrysler Building. Pardon me, coming through! We pass Grand Central, including the small bridge, and then finally reach the Chrysler Building, but it is on the wrong side of the road. The spire of the Chrysler Building looks a bit off. It's lacking its iconic triangular windows. But this is the only game on our list that lets you take the taxi to the very top of the Chrysler Building and then throw it at a helicopter. I'm not a very big fan of Times Square in The Godfather. Even in the 1950s, it was far more built up and had way more billboards than this. But we can ask nicely to borrow a yellow taxi. Our route to the Chrysler Building is incredibly accurate. See, look, there's New York Library, and then there's Grand Central, including the bridge we need to pass under. And then we arrive at the beautiful Art Deco masterpiece that is the Chrysler Building. But the gold star has to go to true crime. We find a very bright and animated version of Times Square. It looks pretty good for a game this old. As we play an undercover cop in this game, we can commandeer a yellow cab and start heading towards the Chrysler Building. Because this game is almost a one-to-one recreation of Manhattan, the street layout and location of the landmarks are 100% accurate. We pass the library on the right, then under a bridge, passing Grand Central on the left, and then here we are, the Chrysler building. It's a pretty nice looking model, so I'm going to have to give this game the gold star for its incredibly accurate street layout. Ride and amusement at Coney Island. If we're truly going to find the best New York, we're going to have to look outside of Manhattan and visit some of the other boroughs. So let's go to Brooklyn and have some fun at the fairground. Straight away, Prototype, Midnight Club, and True Crime all fail, due to their lack of a Brooklyn. Even though this borough can be found in The Division, The Godfather, and Driver, it doesn't go far south enough to reach Coney Island. We can visit the theme park in Driver parallel lines. There are lots of people walking around here, but unfortunately, none of the rides are animated. Guess they're all switched off for the day. We can't even go down the slide. As this game is set across 2 different time periods, there's a rather cool detail. If you come back to the fairground in 2006, it's been abandoned, and it's now completely vandalised. Speaking of abandoned theme parks, rather disappointingly, that's the same case in GTA 4. There's a very detailed fairground in this game's version of Coney Island. There are lots of different stalls, and many different types of ride, but unfortunately for us, it's all been closed down for a redevelopment. I guess we'll have to wait for GTA 5 before we can ride the roller coaster. You can bring in Cousin Bowling here, but bowling doesn't count as a fairground ride. When we reach Coney Island in The Crew 2, there are actually some animated rides here. At last! Finally! There are spinny ones, carousel ones, Ferris wheels, but how on earth am I going to ride these things? With this tower drop ride, might have some potential. I thought I'd clip straight through this thing, but it looks like it does actually have physical mass. It took a few attempts. Then finally, I got there! Here I am, riding a motorcycle, riding a ride. That's a pass right there. But the best fairground has to go to Spider-Man 2. In the main mission story, Peter and his pals enjoy an evening at the fairground. The place is full of happy NPCs, walking around with the prizes they've won on some of the games, which we can also take part in. But that's not what we're here for the rides. And there are many we can have a go on, including the spinny one, the Ferris wheel, and my personal favourite, the roller coaster. This level is a lot of fun, and has a very climactic ending. When the bad guys show up and ruin our fun, Spider-Man 2 wins another gold star. With 8 challenges down, let's look at the scoreboard. Grand Theft Auto 4 and Spider-Man 2 both have 6 points, but with 4 gold stars, Spider-Man has taken the lead. True Crime New York City is just a point behind with 5, with Driver parallel lines and The Crew 2 both with 4 points. The Division is the only game on our list yet to win a single point. There are still 7 more rounds to go. Okay, so brace yourself guys, it's about to take a bit of a change of tone. I asked you if I should include this topic, and you overwhelmingly said yes, so here goes nothing. The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center once stood proudly over Manhattan's skyline, until that infamous day in 2001. Manhattan and America was left with an open wound that needed healing. After much planning, 2 pools were built on the footprints of the towers, as a place to reflect, and remember those who tragically lost their lives that day. Also, a giant new skyscraper was built, called World Trade Center 1, also known as the Freedom Tower. This left game developers with a choice. They could either leave this area blank and risk getting accused of censoring history, but then including your own version of these pools, or the Freedom Tower, also brings its own problems. So let's find out what choice these 10 games have made. I'll be awarding the points here for historical accuracy. Seeing as The Godfather takes place in the 1940s, we'll start there. This is way before the Twin Towers were even built. What we should find on this site is a street full of electrical stores, known as Radio Row, but if I head to the rough location on the map, all I can find is industrial buildings, so not very historically accurate. Driver came out in 1999, and we can find the towers standing tall and proud. One interesting detail is the Unisphere, which is a sculpture of a large brass sphere that used to sit in between the 2 towers. It's only in 2D, but it's a really cool detail. Midnight Club came out in 2000, so again we can find the Twin Towers, towering above the other buildings in the map. There's a few nice details as we drive around the plaza, and can even go into the underground car park. The next game to release was True Crime. We're now in 2005. Seeing as True Crime's map is an almost one-to-one recreation of Manhattan, there's not really anywhere to hide. We can head to the exact location of the site, and then we find a massive open pit, surrounded by construction fencing. This is basically exactly what you'd find at this site in 2005, so very historically accurate. Driver Parallel Lines, which came out in 2006, has a very unique problem with its dual time settings. In the 70s, you can find the towers standing proudly, and just like in the original Driver, you can see the Koenigssphere, in slightly more detail this time. Fast forward to 2006, and much like we found in True Crime, there's a large open pit surrounded by construction fencing. Both games didn't have to put this here, they could have easily left it blank. Both developers are clearly not shying away from history. GTA 4 was released in 2008. In this point in time, there should be heavy construction going on at this site. Interestingly, as soon as you start the game, The topic of terrorism comes up straight away, as it's the reason given for why you can't leave the first island to explore more of the map. When we head to this area, nothing really sticks out. There is construction yards nearby, but we can't really say that this is a direct reference to Ground Zero. There are 2 brass globes in the south part of the map, which some people seem to think is a reference to the Unisphere, but I disagree. If we head over to the site and prototype, there's literally nothing here, just some generic skyscrapers. The last 3 games on our list all came out after the Freedom Tower was completed. In the Division, the map doesn't stretch far enough south to reach the plaza, but when we're in Brooklyn, we can clearly see the skyline, and World Trade Center 1 is absent from it. The Crew 2 has its own version of the Freedom Tower. It's probably the most realistic of all the games featured. It looks good at a distance, but when you get up close you can see it's completely different, but its silhouette is kind of the same. Spider-Man 2 also has its own version of the Freedom Tower. It has similar angles, but looks clearly different. And neither of these 2 games have a version of the memorial fountains, so no pass for either, I'm afraid. Now initially I wasn't going to award a gold star to any of the games, because giving a gold star to the best Ground Zero just didn't sit right with me. But then, whilst I was in Driver Parallel Line, trying to smash up some hot dog stands, I saw something that surprised me. If you're in 2006, and you head to the most southerly part of the map, you can find the Königsphere. What's it doing here? Well, it turns out it survived the attack, with minor damage, and in 2006 it was located down here in Battery Park, which is an amazing detail. They didn't have to include this, but they chose to. It's a very touching detail. It shows that we remember, and also we are not afraid. Whew, things got a bit deep then. Okay, I think it's time we all just had a bit of a chill out. Let's go to Chinatown. Let's just take a stroll around and see what details we can find. For some reason, Chinatown is missing in the Crew 2. It's also missing in the Division, and in the Godfather, it's been completely consumed by Little Italy, because you know the whole Italian mobster thing. Driver decided it was important enough detail to add though. You see many signs with Chinese writing, and a few brightly coloured storefronts. If anything, Chinatown in this game is a bit too big. It seems to stretch over quite a big area. The detail is a little low, but it's definitely Chinatown. It has slightly more detail and variation in Driver Parallel Lines, but everything here looks incredibly blurry. But again, you can tell we're definitely in Chinatown, although the streets around here do feel a little bit wide, compared to what you see in the real Chinatown. The nightclub also has a very clearly defined Chinatown, with plenty of Chinese signs, and even lanterns going across the street, which is a very important feature to have for an authentic looking Chinatown. Again, the streets in this district feel a little bit wide, and other than the signs and the lanterns, it's lacking any real detail. The Chinatown in GTA 4 feels a lot more authentic. The streets here are narrower. There's lots of different variety in the signage. Again, we can see some lovely details, like the lanterns going across the street, and this Chinese market. There are lots of different shops and restaurants, and other important details are the fire escapes, and buildings of green detailing, which we see all over Chinatown. Chinatown in Spider-Man 2 is absolutely gorgeous to walk around. It definitely has the most detailed storefronts. The crispy ducks in this window look particularly tasty. Each storefront feels unique, and there's lots of variety in the signage. There's also some gorgeous murals painted on the walls. But there's just one thing that bothers me, that stops Spider-Man from getting the gold star, and that's the lack of lanterns. It's Chinatown, you're gonna have Chinese lanterns. Obviously this is for gameplay purposes. If Spidey went swinging through here and there's a bunch of Chinese lanterns in the way, you'd either have to have it so he'd clip straight through them, or create some detailed wire and lantern physics to wrap around Spidey's face, which would be hilarious, but sounds very complicated. In my personal opinion, I think True Crime has the best of all the Chinatowns. It's the one that feels the most authentic. It feels like it could actually be a real place. I think it's mainly down to the scale of the buildings and the streets. I think it's also because there's so many little alleyways and side streets where you can find additional stores and markets. There's an impressive amount of detail here for a game this old. There's lots of variety in the storefronts and signage. They've done a really good job, so that's why I'm giving it the gold star. Take a boat ride down the Hudson or East River. Taking a boat tour or going on a ferry ride is a fine way to spend a day in New York. So how many of our games let you do that? Both Driver and Driver Parallel Lines have no boats. Well, this is Driver and not Sailor after all. Same goes for Midnight Club and the Goddaddy. It turns out the boats in True Crime are just ghost ships. If you head down to the waterfront in the Division, the first thing you'll notice is that there's shipwrecks everywhere. But if you look a little closer, you'll actually notice there are smaller animated boats going in between these shipwrecks. So pretty cool detail. Unfortunately, we have no way of reaching these to go for a boat ride. Prototype only has the one boat in the game, and it's very big and it gets very angry if you try and board it. So no boat rides here either. The Crew 2 gets our first pass, as obviously we can just turn into a boat anytime we like. There are also a couple of races we can take part in, heading around the waterways of New York, which is a lot of fun. You get some great views of the city out in the water, and there's a little bit of boat traffic with some yachts, but not a lot. You can also take a boat trip in GTA 4. One of our pals, Brucey, has one. If you call him up, he'll happily take you out into the waves, but only if you're driving, of course. Just like the Crew 2, you get a nice view of the city, but the boat traffic is quite minimal. The same can't be said for Spider-Man 2. The waterways around New York in this game are absolutely heaving with boat traffic. You can see everything from little yachts and speedboats, all the way up to massive freighters and ferries. You may not be able to drive a boat, but it's very easy to web your way onto the back of one and go for a little sail. Look, these guys don't seem bothered at all. Don't mind me folks, just your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Frolic in the Unisphere Fountain. It's time to head to another borough, and this time it's Queen's turn. If you grew up in the 90s like me, then thanks to the movie The Men in Black, the only Queen's landmark you'll be familiar with is the Unisphere fountain and those weird UFO tower things, built in Flushing Meadows for the New York's World Fair. To complete this one, we need to jump into the fountain with the giant globe, and frolic means just to play or move about in a cheerful and lively way. Queens is only reachable in 4 out of our 6 games, so fail straight away for Driver, The Division, Prototype, The Godfather, True Crime and Midnight Club. The map of Spider-Man does contain part of Queens, but unfortunately we can't reach the Unisphere. But interestingly enough, you can actually see it. If you head to the most northern eastern part of the map, you can just about see the top of the Unisphere, and the UFOs, which is pretty cool. We can reach the park in Driver Parallel Lines, complete with the giant Unisphere. I have to say that the fountain itself is rather lacking. It's just the ground painted blue rather than actual physical water, and it was very hard to get the player character to frolic around in the fountain. Well, he is on a moody revenge quest, but I'm feeling generous today. It gets a pass. TK, that's his name, TK. What a stupid name. We can also find the Unisphere in the crew too, and it's a great place to do donuts in your hovercraft. Why not? This definitely counts as frolicking. Look, we're having a great time. But the best frolicking and best Unisphere fountain has to go to GTA 4. You're spoiled for choice for fountains around here. They're all over the place. And yes, Nico, that's some mighty fine frolicking right there. You're going to pass and a gold star. With 3 challenges left to go, let's take a look at the scoreboard. GTA 4 has finally taken the top spot, with 9 points. Spider-Man 2 is just behind with 8 points, and a whopping 5 gold stars. True Crime and Driver Parallel Lines are joint third, and still way down in last place is The Division. It definitely doesn't deserve to be there. Could there perhaps be some sort of flaw in ranking games in this way? No, of course not. It's the games that are rubbish. It's definitely nothing to do with this really arbitrary way of ranking games. Anyway, it's still all to play for. Take a stroll along the waterfront in New Jersey. I know New Jersey isn't one of New York's boroughs, it's actually a whole other state, but I still feel like a decent map in New York should include New Jersey. Yet again, we start with a bunch of failures, as none of the following games' maps include New Jersey. True Crime, The Division, Prototype, Midnight Club, Driver, and Spider-Man 2. But in this game, we do get a wonderfully detailed view of New Jersey. Maybe we'll get together in Spider-Man 3. Who knows? We can visit New Jersey in the crew too, but it has to be said, it's rubbish. I'm giving it a failure for this one, and not just because the specification was to take a stroll, just no effort has been put into this waterfront, so I can't allow a pass. Excuse me a second, I have some totally legitimate business to take care of. We can go for a nice stroll in The Godfather, but it doesn't look like the New Jersey we know today, as back at this time period, it was mostly industrial docks and warehouses, and that's exactly what we see here in the game. Driver Parallel Lines also includes New Jersey. If we head there in the 70s, it's all low-rise brick buildings. But in 2006, it looks a lot more like the modern-day New Jersey. There's a big promenade to stroll along, with lots of towering office buildings, and you get a fine view of the New York skyline. But the best New Jersey has to go to GTA 4, as they've actually bothered to put some proper detail into it. It gives this place its own unique feel and personality. There are detailed office buildings, based on the ones you'd see in real life, and you get a great view of the skyline on the other side of the river, complete with viewing binoculars. So we've already spent time in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. So that just leaves the Bronx and Staten Island. But because there's bugger all there, let's go to the Statue of Liberty instead. This might just be New York's most famous landmark. But surprisingly, we can only visit Lady Liberty in 2 of these games. We can see it just about off in the distance in Driver, Spider-Man 2, Midnight Club, Prototype, The Godfather, Driver Parallel Lines, and True Crime. Although she's a lot closer to Manhattan than she is in real life in this game. I know you can visit Liberty Island in The Division 2, in the Warlords of New York DLC, but we're not ranking that game here, so I'm sorry, The Division gets another fail. We can find our first Lady Liberty in GTA 4, but here she's called the Statue of Happiness. She holds a cup of coffee, rather than a flaming torch, and some say she has the face of Hillary Clinton. There's some nice detailing around the island, we can see a few jetties and outbuildings, and you can even walk through a visitor centre. And of course we have the totally accurate beating heart, which you'll find inside the real Statue of Liberty. What? I've not been there. I can't confirm nor deny whether that's actually there in real life. But despite this amazing detail, I have to give the gold star to the crew too. And not just because they have a really nice model of the Statue of Liberty, complete with flaming torch. Their representation of Liberty Island is 100% spot on. All the jetties are in the right place, and even the layout of all the buildings. This is exactly what you see in real life. Well, except maybe all the racing billboards. Okay, here we go, the final round, which I'm calling the Sightseeing Lightning Round. Can we find these 5 landmarks? The Flatiron Building, Madison Square Garden, Washington Square Arch, St. Patrick's Cathedral, and the United Nations headquarters. You need 4 out of 5 to get a pass. Also, the sites have to be in roughly the right place and actually look like what they're supposed to look like in real life. Driver Parallel Lines can only manage 2 of these landmarks. We can find a fairly decent Flatiron Building and Washington Arch. There's nothing resembling the UN headquarters or the other 2, so that's a fail. Prototype only manages 3 out of the 5. We can find pretty decent models of Washington Arch, Madison Square, and the United Nations headquarters, but there's no sign of the Flatiron Building or St. Patrick's Cathedral. Shockingly, GTA 4 fails this one. I know, right? I was surprised too. We can find a decent Flatiron Building and a highly detailed cathedral. And it also boasts probably the best version of the United Nations HQ out of all these games, complete of armed guards that will shoot you if you try and get too close. But there's absolutely no sign of Madison Square Garden. There is an arch in Middle Park, but the dimensions are way off, and it's in completely the wrong place, so I can't allow a pass for this one. You find basic versions of Madison Square Garden, Washington Arch, and the Flatiron Building in Driver, but there's no sign of the UNHQ, and I guess the neo-Gothic architecture of St. Patrick's was just too much for this old game to handle. All eyes are on the Division. Can I finally claim a point in the last round? Straight away, we can't reach Washington Arch, as its location sits outside the playable map, so we need to get 4 out of 4 on the others to pass. Early on in the story missions, we visit Madison Square Garden, which has been turned into a field hospital, and it's probably the best Madison Square Gardens out of all the ones on this list, as it has a fully explorable interior. I now risk life and limb trying to find the other landmarks, as my character's level is way too low to be visiting these areas. I managed to find a very nice looking Flatiron Building, when it renders in anyway. There's also a very nice looking UNHQ. Let's go in for a closer look. Let's not go in for a closer look. And then last but not least we have St. Patrick's Cathedral, which in this game has been turned into a safe house. A lot of the facade has been covered by scaffolding, but it has a fully explorable crypt. Well done Division, you finally got a point. I'm proud of you. Midnight Club also has a Madison Square Garden you can enter, because why not? We can also find the Arch, the United Nations headquarters, and St. Patrick's Cathedral, which is quite impressive for a game this old. But the Flatiron Building in this game looks absolutely awful. I mean, just look at it. It's way too modern, looks nothing like it. The Crew 2 also manages to pass with its under-detailed landmarks. We can clearly see Madison Square Garden, the Flatiron Building, St. Patrick's, and the UN headquarters, but no Arch. In the Godfather we can find a very nice looking Flatiron Building, and St. Paddy's Cathedral, but the Washington Arch is missing, even though it's definitely been built in this time period. I've had to make a couple of changes for the other two, seeing how the UNHQ and Madison Square Garden weren't actually built yet. Instead of Madison Square Garden we should see the beautiful Penn Station, and when we head to this location on the map, that's exactly what we see. Here it is in all its white, pillory beauty. It's a shame they demolished this thing. And instead of the UNHQ, we should see a bunch of industrial buildings. And that's exactly what we see. So the Godfather gets a historically accurate pass on this one. So, do any of our games manage to get 5 out of 5? Well yes, 2 actually managed this. First up we have Spider-Man 2, where we can find a beautifully detailed Washington Arch. Probably the best one on this list. There's also a very nice looking Flatiron Building, Madison Square Garden, and a highly detailed St. Patrick's Cathedral. But the UNHQ is a little bit disappointing. It's here, but it doesn't look quite right. So that leaves us with True Crime New York City. As this game has a one-to-one recreation of Manhattan, I was able to open up Google Maps and use it to guide me to all the landmarks' exact real-world locations. Find decent models of the Arch, Madison Square, Flatiron, St. Patrick's, and the UNHQ. They may not be as detailed as Spider-Man's models, but they're all very accurate, and they have to be rewarded for being the right locations. So gold star on the final challenge. Right, this is it. Moment of truth. Who's won this thing? In last place we had the Division with 1 lonely point. Look, we all know the Division doesn't deserve to be here. It has a brilliant and highly detailed version of New York, but it was let down massively because it covers a relatively small area of New York, has limited gameplay mechanics, and the fact that it's set during a plague. So Division fans, please don't hunt me down and kill me. I'm very sorry. Next up is Prototype with 3 points. This New York just lacked a lot of detail. Up next is the Godfather, again lacking detail. Then we have Driver, which did surprisingly well considering how old this game is. Midnight Club has 6 points, and the Crew 2 has 8 with 1 gold star. In 4th place is Driver Parallel Lines. It also has 8 points, but with 2 gold stars, it just pulls ahead of the Crew 2. In 3rd place is True Crime. This also has 8 points, but its really accurate one-to-one layout really played into its favour, earning it 3 gold stars and the bronze medal. In 2nd place we have Spider-Man 2. This version of New York was absolutely stunning. If this list had just been things in Manhattan, it probably would have won. Which means GTA 4 is the worthy winner. Rockstar's attention to detail really paid off on this one, and it's a good solid all-rounder, with its map covering a big area, and including a lot of important details. So there we have it, New York City has been done. I'm almost certainly going to return to here at some point in the future, as there are so many more New York games I've missed. But first, let's head to a few more cities. Where shall I go next? I will definitely be carrying on with this series, but I want to complete a couple of other projects first, just so I don't get burnt out working on the same series. My next video is going to be my most ambitious. It's going to be a bit similar to this one, as we're covering video games and visiting geographical locations, so I'm sure you'll love it. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. And also like, share, comment, and do all that good stuff to help this video find an audience. I'm Foolish Pedro, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.